Paul, welcome to the Cellar Studio.
It's very nice to be here.
How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. And yourself?
Very good. Yeah, I mean, thanks for making time during the middle of harvest. You guys are in the thick of it, eh?
We've just started, actually. So first Pinots came in today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that for the Village range, or will that also go into the estate?
So it's vineyard specific, but a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So today we're here to unpick, uncover, discover, understand Pinot Noir subject. I thought you would be a great team member to bring in, but I've heard a whisper in the vines that maybe 15 years ago we would have been talking about Bordeaux, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot. Tell me about the origins of your journey in Elgin, farming, obviously vineyards, winemaking, and how did you end up at the pinnacle, which is Pinot Noir?
Sure. So, I mean, firstly, I have to say, so it was actually more than 15 years ago.
Yeah, it was,
It's now about 20 years ago.
Wow.
And, so my father pioneered the first commercial growings here in the mid-80s. In the 90s, we started making wine in our own cellar here. I joined the family business in the late 1990s. Obviously, having gone to Stellenbosch University, what do you drink? Red wine, right? So for those of you who know, Tassie's was my go-to wine. If I took out a girl on a date, it was Chateau Libertas. I had to upgrade a little bit. But those were easy drinking red wines, right? Blends, they were palatable. And I think it's a wonderful introduction to wine. But then as I've started and getting to know people within the wine industry, you very quickly learn that in South Africa, especially South Africa, but if you go to what would be our Napa Valley, Stellenbosch, they all have their own estate blends. It's the quintessential wine that defines the estate. So my dream and passion was to do exactly the same. I was going to make a Bordeaux blend, more than likely Cabernet Franc, Merlot dominated, and our winemaker had the privilege of working at one of the best Bordeaux producers in the world.
Wow.
So he worked at Chateau Margaux.
Wow.
And we got to know the president of Chateau Margaux, Paul Pontellier.
What a gentleman, man.
Absolutely amazing person. And he came out to South Africa, and I said, this is the perfect opportunity to have one of the greatest minds in Bordeaux blends to give us some guidance. And he came over to the winery and tasted some of the wines out of the barrel and said it's good, which I wasn't very impressed with. I wanted to make great wines, and this went on, and eventually said, do you mind if I taste your Pinot Noir? And I was like, well, you kind of from Bordeaux, but okay, you can try the Pinot. And he got to the third or fourth barrel, and he turned around to me and said, so why do you want to make a Bordeaux blend if the best red wine in your cellar is a Pinot? And it was a difficult decision to make, because you can imagine 20 years ago in South Africa, Pinot Noir was still a difficult varietal. I mean, Hamilton Russell Vineyards was famous for producing Pinot. But there were few good examples of great Pinot Noir in South Africa. So to then pivot towards this variety was a very, very big decision, which we did. We took the brave leap of faith, and to be honest, grateful that we've done it.
Yeah. But a pivot in the wine industry isn't like a pivot in the software industry. I mean, this is a 10-year turning the ship. Take replanting, taking things out.
So the good news is, obviously, we had some Pinot Noir plantings, and we a fair amount. But we had significant plantings in Cabernet Sauvignon, Shiraz, Merlot. And needless to say, we've pulled all of that out. So equivalent to almost a wine farm size, 30 hectares of red wine varietals we grubbed.
Even that last little Cabernet Franc block that you...
last little Cabernet Franc block. And I think what's important is do you want to be an also player, or do you want to be one of the best people in the game? And the question we had asked at the time was, can we make world-class Cabernet Sauvignons on our property? I'm not talking about the whole of Elgin. I'm just saying on Paul Cluver wines. And the answer was we were always going to make better Pinot Noir than what we were going to be producing Cabernet Sauvignon. So it was more about let's focus on our strengths and then fine tune it and hone it and learn and just get better and better with that.
It's an amazing journey because, I mean, since we've started working with you, I think right at the beginning there was still that estate blend. It was the...
I mean, we kept on making... So this was, as I said, 20 odd years ago, so 2001, 2002. The last Cabernet Sauvignon vintage we made was 2005.
Okay. Yes.
So then you still sell that for a couple of years. So 2007 was about the last time that we actually
and that's when we
sold it.
started our business. And then, I mean, at the same time, there's also been a focusing towards Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc. And you also have the aromatic varietals like Gewürztraminer and Riesling, but even that has also become less of a focus. It's been an amazing process to see, because it's the same team from the beginning that's actually been learning and implementing and adapting.
But let me ask you this question: if I said to you, we're going out for dinner, right?
Where are we going? Somewhere fancy.
Where are we going exactly? But the first thing you want to know is what does the restaurant specialize in?
Yeah.
If I said to you, it does great pizza, it does wonderful sushi. By the way, the Thai food there is fantastic, and the steaks are also amazing. You're going to say, what the hell's going on, right?
Sounds like those restaurants in Cape Town in sort of the mid-2000s.
So if you say, I want to go to an Italian restaurant and they specialize in Italian food, or if I want to go to a Japanese restaurant that specializes in sushi or Japanese style food, or I want to go to a restaurant that specializes in fish or fish dishes. And I think that type of specialization in any industry is critical for success, or is critical if you want to be at the top of your game. So if you want to make every type of thing under the sun, then it comes at a price. And it's the good old saying, you're a jack of all trades and master of none.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so, I mean, let's jump into it. I mean, Pinot Noir, I think the most common starting sentence in most wine textbooks is it's the heartbreak grape. But, the first thing that we notice in when you open a Pinot Noir and you pour it is just that lighter color. So it's a thin-skinned grape variety. Is that one of the reasons for that heartbreak in terms of the susceptibility to the growing rigors that the grapes can encounter, rain and hail and sunburn?
Yeah, so without a doubt, one of the most difficult grape varietals to grow is Pinot Noir, and hence the reason heartbreak grape. It's if you consider in South Africa. I believe there are two dominant areas in South Africa that can grow and ripen Pinot Noir properly to be able to make a red wine. And I say grow and make a red wine is because the most amount of risk happens in that last month before ripening. And the closer you get to ripening, the more susceptible it is to extreme weather conditions. And
ripening would be harvest.
Yeah. So the closer you get to the harvest date, fruit are reaching optimal ripeness. That's also when if you now get an extreme heat, if you get rain or hail, that's detrimental to that end product. So even though the most plantings of Pinot Noir in South Africa is not in the Hillman-Arder Valley or Elgin.
Really?
It's in Robertson, Paarl and Stellenbosch. But those areas never ripen Pinot Noir to be able to be a red wine. They ripen it at a much lower level to be able to make sparkling wine. So it actually ends up as a white wine, not as a red wine. If you want to ripen it properly, that you get those fantastic red wine characteristics, you need optimal growing conditions. And the same applies in France. Most Pinot Noir is planted, not in Burgundy, but in Champagne. But it's in Burgundy where this ripens properly to be able to make this incredible red wine. And then, as you say, so it's a lighter color, but then it's got fantastic acidity. It's the true attraction about Pinot Noir is that silky, velvety texture on the palate. It's not about being big and bold and in your face and structural and it is about finesse and elegance and sexiness, which is what this wine is all about.
It's so true. And so let's dive into ripeness, because I think, actually, I need a sip as well.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Ripeness in red wine, let's focus on red wine. It's a few things, right? I mean, you've got obviously sugar ripeness, which is maybe what you would first look at, especially in a warmer climate. You can't have your sugars being so high that you then harvest a high alcohol wine, essentially. But then there's that phenolic, or what I just sort of call it flavor ripeness for simplicity's term. But then you're also getting other, ripenesses, like even the stalks, the tannins.
Yeah.
I mean, is that the goal really with Pinot Noir from a growing perspective? Is you don't want any of those to spike or fall behind. You actually want that gentle, constant sort of ripeness ladder.
So I would say that's the goal with any wine, whether it's Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, or Sauvignon Blanc, or Merlot, or Chardonnay. The question is, where does each varietal optimally show its potential? So if you look at Cabernet Sauvignon, it tends to ripen much later. So if you're in a warmer area, because it ripens later, it actually falls into an area where it's naturally cooler at night. You get day-night temperature differences. Those temperature differences is what you refer to as that flavor ripeness or phenolic ripeness. So that gets accentuated with day-night temperature differences. So that's fantastic as we start cooling down. Now, Pinot Noir, because it's an earlier ripening variety, if you in a cooler area, it naturally ripens later than a warmer area. So you push it into the optimal area.
So more hang time,
exactly.
more development of tannin flavor.
So the sugar's easy. You just pick it earlier or later, right?
Yeah.
But if you want those beautiful berry flavors combined with optimal sugar, optimal acidity, then it's about where's the best place to grow it. And that's what it ultimately boils down to.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely get into that vineyard selection sort of discussion. But what we have here is your estate Pinot Noir. So this is a 2020 vintage. And what kind of a journey has it been, to discover that profile, that style of Paul Cluver Pinot Noir? Because, Pinot Noir from different parts of Burgundy, and then obviously from different parts of the world, you get the sort of maybe more fruit-forward, polished, Pinot Noirs from New Zealand, which I absolutely adore. But then you get those really kind of farmyardy, earthy, mega complex Pinot Noirs from parts of Burgundy. Where does, obviously your wine, but also where does Elgin and maybe South African Pinot Noir, do you think, kind of sit on that spectrum? I mean, it's such an obvious question. We're always benchmarking against the rest of the world. We've got to stop doing that at some point.
I was going to say we are very South African.
Exactly.
And that should be our benchmark.
Yeah.
I think, and this is a critical point when we talk about terroir. Terroir is not only place. So it's not only climate and soil, but it's the interaction of us as humans with climate and soil
100%.
And what we make of that.
100%.
So I think that when it comes to our Pinots, we're not, generally speaking, South African producers are not striving to make these fruit-forward varietal characters.
Yeah.
We are gifted with the ability, with amazing old soils, and because of that, we can actually show a complexity in the wines that probably is more reminiscent of what Burgundy can show. If you don't have it, well, then it's more difficult to try and show it, right?
Totally.
If you do have it and don't show it, what a pity. So can we make, fruity, light-hearted style Pinot Noirs? Definitely. But I think you will lack a complexity and enjoyment
Yeah.
in the wines that our soils are able to give us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suppose it's, we've got these ancient soils. And I mean, just looking at your property, from the sort of more, I would imagine, decomposed granite at the top into your coffee clip that you've shown me at the bottom, that incredible ironstone soil. But then at the same time, we've got the climatic effects, the cooler climate. But then we also are under an African sun. So we've got these beautiful warm days with, which are amazing for ripening. So we've got all these aspects. It's kind of like that new world fruit meets some of the old world sort of soil and character. So from a Pinot Noir perspective on your property, are you looking to plant on a cooler slope, or what is your? I mean, that must have been a learning curve in itself, right?
It definitely. I mean, we still learning.
Yeah.
I hopefully my grandchildren would reap the benefits of our hard work. But and I say grandchildren because we have to realize the time frame.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned 10, 20, so our focus started 20 years ago, and then let's say if I plan a new vineyard, I might plant it in 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Then it takes 3-4 years before it gets into production.
Yeah.
And then we tend to say that, well, it's too young to really show its potential. So I really start measuring it at 10 years old.
Yeah.
So to give you an example, the state Pinot Noir, no grapes are in that wine of vines that are younger than 10 years. Seven Flags, over 30 years.
Wow.
Okay. Now I say, well, I can only start judging it at 10 years old, but it takes 2 years to make the wine. So that's 12 years down the line. And am I going to judge it on only one vintage? Probably not.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to judge it on 3 or 4 vintages. And then I might end up and turning around and say, the site was great, but maybe I picked the wrong clone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
the clone would be not only like rootstock, but the actual
clonal
of the
varietal of the Pinot Noir. So in Pinot Noir, you've got several different clones that you can select from, ranging from 113, 115, 667, 777, 943, and then the list just goes on and on. Now, so let's hope you got all of those variables right, and if you didn't, you might go, well, maybe I should try something new.
Yeah.
So it's a learning process. It's a continuously learning process, and in that process, we also we have variables like weather. So this vintage is not the same as last vintage, is not the same as next year's vintage, and so what do I judge it on? I should probably judge it on a 10-year average.
Absolutely.
Which means I'm 20 years down the line.
Yeah. And you've got the advantage of having done this since the 80s.
Yes.
But most farms that have planted Pinot Noir in South Africa, it's more like since late 1990 or early 2000.
And make no mistake, we can accelerate our learning.
Yes.
Right. So we have a better understanding. We analyze the soils. We can, with weather modeling, understand the weather.
New clones, I would imagine that since
and we can say, well, this clone worked in your area, maybe it will work in my area. So we at least, it's not a shotgun approach shooting in the dark. We more or less know the direction we should be shooting in, and then hope we hit something. But that's part of the amazing journey about wine producing. And it's an incredible amount of fun for us. Is part of that learning experience. Have we been lucky on the journey? Yes. If we haven't been lucky, we wouldn't have been producing Seven Flags.
Absolutely.
Right? So if what we have here with Seven Flags is absolutely phenomenal.
It's a culmination of that 30-year.
But my expectation is that it's going to be even better in 10 years' time. Partly because our knowledge, our experience is continuously growing, and we're on a steep learning curve.
It's a great French term, that élevage, where you're constantly raising up the wine, constantly learning, constantly improving.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'd love to do, I mean, this is, Paul, I've always, I think this Pinot Noir has found its way to many corners of the continent, and it's an absolute classic. What do you look for in a Pinot Noir? From a nose, structure, flavor. If you are watching this sitting in Kenya or Ghana or Nigeria or anywhere in Africa with guests that are being served, and there's a big focus, obviously, to look at Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Cabernet blends. How do you bring Pinot Noir from South Africa into the conversation? Like, what has it got to offer guests?
So, firstly, I should say that unlike in South Africa, the majority of the world wine consumers have got a much better understanding of Pinot Noir than what people even in South Africa have.
It's true, yeah.
And why do I say that? If you look at America, for example, the top-selling red wine is Merlot,
yeah,
followed by Cabernet Sauvignon,
yeah,
followed by Pinot Noir. It's bigger than Shiraz.
Yeah.
It is. Pinotage doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. Yet in South Africa, for example, it's a very, very small category. So for our international consumers, especially Africa, or if you think of tourism, people coming traveling
back
into the market,
after the last 2 years,
it's the type of variety people understand. It's also the type of variety that works exceptionally well with food dishes. And I would think especially African dishes. Because African dishes tends to have flavor and spice and character to it, that Pinot Noir as a grape variety, because it's got that ability to complement a wide variety of dishes.
Yeah.
It just goes so beautifully with this. Yeah. So what would I say to someone drinking it in Kenya or Ghana or the Indian Ocean Islands, is that firstly it's great because it's probably one of the red wines that really likes being chilled,
yes,
or drinking it a little bit cooler, which if you're in that, it's fantastic.
Lifelong mission to bring more chilled, slightly chilled reds.
Then Pinot Noir's got those beautiful, it's got those strawberries, hints of cherry. You also mentioned it's got sometimes this earthy, mushroomy. What I also love to pick up in our Pinots, it's got this minerality to it. So almost iron-like, if you're biting or sucking a stone. And then it's got this fresh, crisp acidity, beautiful length on the palate. So it just goes so well with a variety of dishes, fish dishes. If you think of a red wine that goes well with fish, there's no better wine than Pinot Noir.
I mean, it's amazing because it sits on that incredible spectrum where you can drink a few glasses just by itself because it is refreshing. It's not going to be overwhelming, maybe like a very rich Chenin or a heavy Cabernet. But then it also bridges the spectrum between poultry, red meats, and seafood.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, I mean, what I'd love to do is jump into the next two wines. I opened a cheeky little Premier Cru from Burgundy, Domaine Jacques Prieur. I believe you're actually quite familiar with this wine. So let's jump into it. Okay, Paul. So I have been very fortunate to travel to multiple wine regions in France and Italy and Portugal, Germany. And I always said to myself, Burgundy would be sort of the final destination when I'm ready, when I've earned it. I haven't earned it. It's a place that fascinates me just because of these microcosms of terroir and culture and tradition and the most interesting people, some of the most interesting people in the wine industry. So tell me about your exposure to Burgundy, potentially this domain even. I believe there's some overlap, which I didn't know, with Paul Cluver. Yeah, tell me your story, Burgundy.
Yeah, so I mean, Burgundy is a fascinating place, right? It's the holy grail of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. It is the spiritual home of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. It is very finite. It's a tiny area, but they know every little pocket of land, and to the extent that they've demarcated it to all these levels of classification. My journey with Burgundy started as I started falling in love with Pinot.
Was there an aha wine or moment?
So actually, in the Elgin Valley, we had a guy called Cornel Spies. I don't know if you ever met him, but he was a huge collector of wine, and one of his passions were Pinot Noir and by extension Burgundy. And he had the most incredible Burgundy wine collection.
Wow.
And not only did he have an incredible wine collection, the generosity of sharing that wine collection.
Yeah.
So opening up a bottle of Burgundy and sharing it with someone else, and they realize, wow, this is incredible. So it started there. Needless to say, as we tend to now only make Burgundy wine like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, we only buy Burgundian coopers.
Okay, so that's the barrels.
That's the barrels. Yeah. So where our barrels come from is from Burgundy, because why? They have an understanding of what type of barrel works with this type of grape. And I've had the pleasure of traveling there a couple of times. My first, no, it wasn't my first. I think it was maybe my third or fourth visit was with a guy that actually imports this wine, Alex Dale.
Yes.
He is passionate
Yeah.
about the area, about the variety, and that's actually where I met Martin Priya. I already knew his wife because she imported barrels into South Africa. Became very good friends to the extent now that his son is actually my godson. So there's really a close relationship with DJP.
Wow.
And Martin actually now consults for us. So
that's incredible. So is that on the wines, on the barrels,
on the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir wine production? So he's actually in South Africa right now as we speak. He landed on Saturday. He'll be here for a week, and then he usually comes out again in October when we start tasting from the barrels when the fermentation process is all finished. And what's fascinating about Martin is obviously being with one of the greatest domains in Burgundy, but he also consults for Connoisseur, which is the largest Pinot Noir producer in Chile.
Oh, wow. Did not know that.
So he has got both New World, Old World experience, working where you have no limitation to working where you actually you can only plant Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And you should. My answer to you is don't wait until you're worthy. You should just go.
Just go. Yeah.
And the reason I'm saying that is the Burgundians are the most incredible, welcoming, modest people, and they're still very, very passionate about their product.
Yeah.
It's not about marketing. It's about actually the intrinsic quality of the end product.
Yeah.
And that's where 99.9% of their focus is. The rest take care of itself.
Yeah.
And the irony is, it's the most expensive wines in the world.
Totally. Yeah, and it seems like, I love the Elgin Valley because I believe it's a valley that's full of farmers first, then winemakers. And that's kind of reminds me of Burgundy, where, if you speak to an Elgin farmer, they're very engaged with the weather, the crop, everything that's going on. It's not a rock star sort of world, it's a lot more sort of terroir growing, mainly because Elgin farmers also usually have some apples hanging around and some pears. It's a full-time farming job. The winemaking side is crucial, but a lot of it is understood to happen in the vineyard, and that's Burgundy. I mean, it seems like they've also gone through an interesting phase where a lot more of their vintages are just great. Is that because of climate change, or is that not necessarily is that a bit of a fallacy?
Definitely. So traditionally we used to say that warmer climates in Burgundy tends to make better vintages. Why? Because if it was too wet,
couldn't even ripen or rotted.
They tend to get rot and
Yeah.
botrytis in the vineyards and that. So without a doubt, today they have better farming practices, but also more fortunate weather for wine production. I would say that you're 100% correct. Elgin farmers tend to have an incredible focus on wine production. And it makes me think again of if you go to a sushi restaurant, there's only so much the chef can do to the sashimi, right?
Yeah.
He cuts the fish and that's it.
Yeah.
If it's a bad fish, it's a bad dish.
Yeah.
But the same applies to steak, if you think about it. You cook it, but I think the only time when you can have average meat is where you cook something in a sauce or you completely hide the integrity of the product
Beef
that you
stroganoff.
actually use. So there was meat in it, right? But when you're enjoying the product in its most simplistic and truest form, quality of the raw materials are so important.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about it, what's wine? What's the ingredients of what makes up a wine? Grapes, yeast, and that's it, right?
Yeah, you don't add anything else. You just add it to something else, like a barrel.
So you can put it in a barrel that has a little bit of the fermentation process and can impart some characteristics in that. So you can say, okay, the barrel can impart some characteristics to it. But that's it, right? There's nothing else you can add to it. You can't say, well, it didn't taste that good. I'm going to put some pepper or salt or spice or something in it. You can't. So that means the importance of good quality grapes is so important to making good wine. So any good winemaker will tell you that.
Yeah, the farming is so crucial, and it's also been interesting to recently go for a drive through your farm, and quite a few of the farms in Elgin, and I'm sure it's the same in Stellenbosch and other regions, but there's a lot of focus on regeneration of older vines. So, not just ripping things out after 15 to 20 years, but also some new trellising methods which are less damaging. If you think about every time you prune a vine, it's almost creates a wound like you would on your arm. And if we keep doing that, it just reduces the circulation and the quality. Is that something that you've also been a bit of an evolution on your Pinot Noir vineyards, or more in other varietals?
No, as I mentioned earlier, it's a continuous learning process. I think what's incredibly important for us is sustainability. So it's working in harmony with nature. And that means we want healthy soils, we want healthy plants, and we want that environment for generations to come. So it's finding that perfect balance between our environment and what we are doing with our farming practices. It's not like we want to farm here for 10 or 20 years and then pack up and go some other place, and it's okay. Because we don't care. Actually, what our specific property offers is what makes us unique. So we want to protect it.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think that approach to farming, I mean, I grew up on a farm, and farming has gone through this evolution of being fairly extractive to a lot more recognition now of putting back in. I mean, I spoke to a few individuals regarding our little vineyards here, and regenerating the soil, cover crops, and it's really interesting getting sort of the old guard. I'm talking like grandfather guard versus the younger generation, and there's a huge focus towards that. And that's really exciting, because whatever you put in your soil, you've got to not just think of this year's crop, but 20 years' time, what it does. Yeah.
Exactly. And you want a living soil at the end of the day, right? So if you end up where the soil's dead, nothing wants to grow there. So you have to ask yourself what kind of microorganisms are flourishing within the soil. So if you have a healthy soil, it's living.
Yeah.
There are bugs and worms and activity taking place.
And that's a big hallmark of Burgundy. I mean, a lot of the vineyards in Burgundy are organic, biodynamic, or at least maybe not the official certificate, but they have the same farming practices.
They don't even say it. It's a way of life, right? I think I think it's a terrible thing if you have to start saying I'm a good person.
Yeah.
And if you say that's
I'm a good person, I promise you I'm a good person.
And that's my reason you should buy my wine, right?
Yeah. You should just be doing it.
You should actually, if you're not a good person, then you should, that's a reason for not buying your wine.
Totally.
I think that should be a minimum entry criteria, right? For actually doing business.
Yeah.
Is doing things right.
Yeah.
Then
even the things that people can't see.
Exactly.
Or especially, should I say?
Exactly. It's doing the but you know what? That's where if you have a long-term view.
Yeah.
Then there's no ways I can hide bad practices for a long period of time. Nature will show you up, right? So if you do the right thing, and you do find a balance between nature and yourself, that's where longevity ends up.
Amazing. And it's in the glass.
This
is an incredible wine, Paul.
Yeah. So this property is just above Beaune. Beaune is one of the villages. So it's one of the big villages in Burgundy.
Yes.
So we tend to say there's the Côte de Beaune and Côte de Nuit.
Yeah.
Those are the two big geographic areas, and one of the old bigger towns. If you consider there's lots of tiny little towns squatted all along Burgundy. What we call the Côte d'Ivoire, which is the coast of gold. And this is a small little property, I would say about 500 meters up the hill, overlooking, and it's a monopole. Monopole meaning it's they own the whole vineyard.
Wow, that's some serious real estate, eh?
Yes. And Lafergin means bad fairy, or witch, whichever way one you want to.
Yeah.
As it's a beautiful area. As I said, the Preur family are amazing people. They produce incredible wines. And it's an honor. It's an honor to at least have a relationship with them.
And you know what's amazing for me about this wine is it's just got so much purity of fruit, but then that minerality really comes through on the palate. And
this is what. So one of the stories I love about Martin, where it almost goes back to your point earlier on about just having fruity wines, because we tasted Pinot Noir with him, and we were like, wow, this is amazing. He's like, I'm not that happy. We're like, but why not? It tastes like the most incredible Pinot Noir. He says, it does taste like Pinot. It has no sense of place.
Okay.
And he said it's because it's too young.
Okay.
Right? So it hasn't actually settled and started showing the unique qualities of its site, of its provenance.
So would that be too young from a vineyard perspective?
From a vineyard perspective,
really?
So when it's youthful, so it tends to just give you fruit.
Yeah.
It just gives you...
Because it is very fruit forward.
Yeah. But it has that, as you said, it's got those minerality, those earth tones that starts coming through and starts showing you this is where I'm from.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's amazing. As soon as people, food, wine has an identity.
Yeah.
That's what makes them interesting. If you just like any other, well, then you're not interesting, right?
Yeah.
And I think the Burgundians do that so well.
Yeah.
Too often in New World winemaking, we tend to not want to show identity. We just want to be, well, here's fruit.
We want to keep polishing to get that, with that soft tannin but huge flavor.
Yeah. But then it's like any other wine.
Yeah.
so why should I drink your wine? What's so special about it? And if you think about it, that gives us the great opportunity and that's what makes wine so fascinating, is because we want to try different wines. We can, that's like having different friends. I have different friends because they stimulate me in different ways. And it's amazing. If all my friends were clones of each other, well, then I don't need 100 of them, right? And that's the amazing thing about wine. We can try different wines and discover these different identities.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's why I'm so excited to visit Burgundy and to go visit some of these domains, because once you've created that link, it's like, earlier today we were talking to Bex from African Bush Camps. Once you've been to that lodge or been to that winery, or people have visited Port Cluver, gone to the top dam with the barrel and tasted, overlooking your property, that's when you can connect the wine, the people, the place, the whole experience together. That's really special. Let's go into your ultimate expression of terroir.
Yes.
Okay, Paul. 7 Flags.
Yes.
We spoke about a little bit earlier around a young vineyard that's just showing lots of vibrance and fruit, and that's kind of like how we used to be, very, very vibrant in our youth. But as one gets older, a little bit more complex, a little bit more interesting, one would hope. And your 7 Flags is the ultimate expression of your terroir. It's all about vineyard age, vineyards that have proven themselves for at least 10 years. How did this come about? I mean, was 7 Flags originally destined to be Pinot Noir? Where did
so the name went, actually, the 7 Flags was originally going to be our Bordeaux blend,
okay,
right? Our quintessential estate blend.
Yeah. So that was put into a vault as the goal. And then
that was the goal. And every year, once we decided we were going to focus on Pinot Noir, every year I went back to our winemaker and I said, so, tell me, have we got it? And he says, not yet.
Not yet.
And then I would go another year and another year, and eventually we released the first vintage of 7 Flags in 2009, which was a 2006 vintage. What was fascinating, what you said is, as we get older, we become more interesting. But part of that is because we have more stories to tell, right? Yeah. And we have experienced
some
more
battle scars.
Yeah. But that makes us more. And what we find is young vines are like teenagers. They live life to the fullest, but they lack sometimes a little bit of balance, right? So they either grow too much, or they overbear, or the vineyards itself. So you don't have this harmony between growth and production. Where with older vines, they don't overcrop so easily. They tend to have a natural harmony, and with this natural harmony, also they have a much greater sense of place. What we spoke on a little bit earlier, and that's where. So, firstly, because there's this natural harmony in production, you tend to get beautiful, amazing fruit concentration, but not sacrificing elegance. And it's for me almost like the wise old man. He doesn't have to get up and shout. He can sit back and relax and he knows, right? He knows. With greater wines, we don't have to be big and bold. You know what? If you're willing to have a conversation, you'll realize it. Yeah. If you're willing to pick it up and enjoy it and drink it, you will discover it. And that's what's for me so amazing about greater wines, great 7 Flags is those little nuances.
It's also great Pinot Noir. It's sort of it kind of whispers to you rather than shouts. You have to go and look for it rather than it shouting out the glass.
But I would say, like great conversations, like great experiences, sometimes the best ones are where you go afterwards. Wow, that was amazing. Time just flew. It's like I spent hours chatting to Elle. It felt like 30 minutes. that was amazing. Is the bottle finished? How did that happen? I didn't even notice it. I mean, if you think about it, if you're drinking a wine, you're going,
working your way through it, yeah.
That's amazing. Oh, I can taste it. It's amazing. But you're actually working through it, as you say, working your way through the wine. The best wines for me was actually, is it finished? It was amazing.
Yeah.
But it talks about it just should almost be seamless. It's like great conversation. It's like great food. It's I think what often makes us appreciate some of these great things is because we are told we should.
Yeah.
Right. So we force ourselves to slow down to appreciate it. But then the amazing thing is it just goes so quickly. And for me, whether it's good food, good company, good experiences, great wine, they all seem to have one thing in common: time flies. It's almost not long enough, right?
and that's the ultimate luxury that we working in the hospitality space and the wine space. The ultimate luxury is time.
Yeah.
And actually, you are producing moments, and that's also what I love about your wine. And a few of the wineries that we work with, you've got your Wednesday evening glass of Pinot, you've got your special occasion estate Pinot Noir, but then you've got something which is, as you most bottles of wine you take out of a wine fridge like this, but some you sort of
don't drop
cradle, and it seems like there's like heaven and angels singing while you're doing it, and this is one of them. And the moment starts way before you even have your first sip, because it's how much effort has gone into it. And that's what I love driving around your farm in December, where I felt like a kid in a candy store. I was like, Paul, which is the Seven Flags? Where's the Seven Flags? Seven Flags, Seven Flags. And it's hallowed ground, hallowed vines, and then obviously the whole process. I mean, where's this site? I mean, you probably got a few individual pockets, but if you compare it, and how did it come about? Is it where you would have anticipated it to be on the farm? If a viticultural consultant came today and told you where it should be planted?
The quick answer is no.
Trial by error.
It's trial. We expected it to be a good site, but we never expected it to be that good.
And we can't say why often. It's just.
And once again, I mean, it's 20 years down the line where you go, okay, I think it's good enough to be able to participate in the Seven Flags. And talking about barrels, which is the only other thing that actually has a big impact on the winemaking. The winemaker will have 3 or 4, 5. We have used a maximum of 5 different coopers, and he would get grapes from this vineyard and put it in a couple of different barrels, and then taste out of the one barrel, and it would be a symphony, right? And he goes, oh, okay, well that. And the others didn't work as well, but they were still good. But it's not where you waxing lyricals. So yeah, it's and next year, okay, you might do the same thing, and hopefully it repeats itself. But you're working with a living product, so it's constantly evolving, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think we've spoken about ripeness, soil, our ancient soils, our terroir, and I think often an overlooked part of winemaking, which is actually a part of terroir, is barrels. Because it's not something that gets ordered online. It's a product that comes from a certain part of Europe. Could be France, could be Hungary, Russia, could be America if you want American oak. But within those countries, there's individual pockets which have got different grains, flavors. I mean, that's a whole other story. And one of my favorite meetings that I've had has been with a family that grows oak in France, and they've been doing it for 400 years. But that's maybe like 4 harvests, right? I mean, they're obviously constantly harvesting, but these trees take 70 to 100 or whatever years to
200 years. Yeah,
it's incredible. So, is this a huge component of the Seven Flags, the oak?
So, both the estate and the Seven Flags 100% oak.
Okay.
Might be a little bit more new oak on the Seven Flags, but not dramatically. But maybe 25% versus 20%.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But it's more the interaction of the fruit with the oak.
Yeah.
And the marriage between those. So do you pick up a bit of spice? Is that the oak? Is it the swale? Is it the...
It's a lovely earthiness too.
Yeah. I mean, this with a... If I had some great venison with this, would be just absolutely superb, right?
Yeah. Should maybe quickly run to Peregrine venison pie.
That wasn't going to be my first choice.
Sometimes it's quite fun to pair a great wine with what you would think is a basic staple.
I mean, just some plain saucisson and some bread would be nice, right?
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that Andre goes to France pretty much every year. Is that to select barrels and just to have discussions? Does he take
but
samples
also learn.
with? Yeah.
I mean, I think what we have to guard against, whether it's in South Africa, but is what I call a house palate, is where you tend to think everything you make is great.
Okay. Yeah. And then you only drink your own wines.
And you only drink your own wines, right? So what's critical is to try other people's wines, to understand what's out there, what are other people doing, where are we in relation to those, where can we improve?
Yeah.
And I think it's critical to have a philosophy of continuous improvement, which is one of our values as a family business. We say we can't stand still. We might as well go forward, right? Just being here, everyone will pass us eventually. So for us, it's getting better every single time, and that means we need to get out there and see what other people are doing. I think it's critical to taste other people's wines within South Africa. I think the quality of South African Pinot Noir as a whole has improved dramatically. It's getting better all the time. And where's the holy grail of Pinot Noir? As we said, it's Burgundy, so we've got to get out there and see what they're doing and taste.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's incredible to taste this wine because, it's got that fruit that I just love in South African Pinot Noir that's come through. But when you taste it, it's really... It does taste like terroir. It's got that sort of prickle that you get when you've got that minerality. It's got that earthiness on the nose, which actually becomes much more sort of fruit driven on the palate. It's a kind of wine where you want to just keep going back to. I'm sorry I forgot the Burgundy glass, but at least it is concentrating things in a big way. But Paul, well done. I mean, I know you can't claim all the credit. Your brother-in-law might disagree.
No, but it's a big team effort.
Totally, right? And your vineyard team.
Yeah. As you know, you run an incredible business, and it's about building a good team. None of us operate in isolation, and it's a privilege for me to be part of this team and to be able to lead this team. But to think that this is me, not at all. There's a lot of people that work behind this, and a lot of people that are passionate and work incredibly hard. And I'm very grateful for what they do.
Yeah, well, all I can say is well done. I look forward to sampling this élevage process on a continuous basis through our journey together as we work together and also spend time together. And yeah, it's just an honor to chat and to get some of your knowledge. For all of our learners across the continent and all of our customers, it's been really great spending time with you. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks
so much.
Thanks.